So without anything further, I want to introduce to you our keynote speaker. She's also going to be doing a book signing and a reading at the Ballard House when we get towards the end of the day at 4 o'clock. So you will have the opportunity to talk with her, to ask her questions, to meet her directly. But I am just so blessed that she changed her schedule. She was scheduled to be in New York today. And she said, well, the convening of this site, of this organization, this is my people. This is where I need to be. I introduce to you as our keynote speaker for this morning, my sister, Jamila Minutes.
I hope I can live up to that introduction. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is such a pleasure to be here with y'all today. I'm truly blessed to be here. Director Njumbe called and asked if I would be here today. I said, yeah, of course, this is my people. So I am so honored to be here fellowshipping with y'all today. It feels surreal to be in this place that I love, Alabama, talking with you in St. Paul United Methodist Church about preserving our stories and promoting our truth. And in fact, when I was putting these remarks together, the very first thing that I did before I wrote a word was I asked God to give me the strength, the courage, and the remarks that were worthy of this convening. So I pray that I don't disappoint. Can y'all still hear me? Okay. So preserving our stories and promoting our truth, these are topics that are near and dear to my heart. It's an honor to talk about loving this soil, wanting to protect and tell the truth about the spaces that have nurtured us, held us, fortified us. The spaces where our children learn their letters and numbers, spaces where we gather to worship and pray, to fellowship, organize, treat our sick, sell our goods, live our lives in spaces like St. Paul, and like the Ballard House, or maybe we did all those things under the same roof. Spaces where we dare to have hope in our community, hope that better is possible for Black people right here in Alabama.
Yeah.
Now, as Director Njumbe mentioned, I was attorney for some years. I'm a storyteller. Now I'm a full-time author. Always told stories for a living. Now I work in fiction, not untruths, because as you know, being a storyteller isn't always a compliment. And if there's one thing I learned in the practice of law and the art of storytelling, it's that words matter. The truest narratives of our lives and of the ones who came before us hinge now on how we define the words that shape our history. So we have to be responsible stewards for our own stories. There's a West African proverb that says, until the lions have their own historians, the tale of the hunt will always go to the hunter. Now, I'm sure we don't have any hunters in here who would dare embellish the size of the buck they took, or how that turkey got away. I'm sure there's nobody in here like that today. But just as the lions have to tell their true story of the hunt, so must we too, as Black people, tell our own stories to make sure our history is told fully, honestly, intelligently, and compassionately.
That's right.
Which is why the consortium exists and why we convene here today to talk about preserving our stories and promoting our truth. And our stories are of folks who know a little something about hope and taking liberty. On Juneteenth, just passed on Monday, we commemorate June 19th because on that date in 1865, news of the Emancipation Proclamation, signed into law 2.5 years before, finally made it to hundreds of thousands of Black people still being enslaved in Texas. Finally, more than 2.5 years after The proclamation was supposed to have freed the enslaved in the rebel states, and almost 2 months after the end of the Civil War, these men, women, and children were told that they'd been free to go wherever they wanted. But surprise, surprise, the message just hadn't made it to them yet. It's no wonder why. Like for many of us, Juneteenth is the day of celebration and reflection for me, because I think a lot about this idea that we were freed when Black people had been taking liberty in ways large and small for 246 years, despite the laws and the shackles and the lies and the fact that white supremacy ruled all of it, allowed all of it. Certainly, the proclamation presumed to remove the shackles of our bondage by force of law, allowing us to move throughout the country without passes or permission, presumed to. But when I reflect on Juneteenth, on freedom, I think about the hope that encouraged Black people to take liberty however we could, wherever we could, and whenever we could, before any proclamation made it legal or advisable to do so. It is the stories of how we made it from there to here that deserve to be elevated, celebrated, and told for true. Now, our ancestors and elders had done more than dream about freedom for 246 years. They had done more than lament the physical condition of being enslaved on this soil. Though the law of the land said that we were not free, we took liberty when we resisted in outward and clandestine ways. Work songs and spirituals became secret code and rallying cries for escape and rebellion. We slowed down work, chewed cotton root and pennyroyal. We escaped and created communities of self-emancipated people who then welcomed others who risked their lives by freeing bondage. For centuries, we had secretly planned and openly advocated for the abolition of slavery. We wrote letters when reading and writing was illegal and risked being reshackled when we gave testimony demanding money, land, training and education, health services, family reunification, and other remedies for the atrocities that the United States allowed to be visited upon kith and kin. We escaped bondage and crossed battle lines and gave our lives fighting as members of the Union Army. These are some ways, just some ways that we took liberty, but we also took liberty by loving our spouses and our children when it was illegal for us to even call somebody our spouse or our child. We took liberty by feeling sun rays warming our face or enjoying the company of a good friend. We rejoiced in the sound of a child's laughter, shed tears when we were hurt, fellowshiped and worshiped together, grieved our dead, cooked for one another, felt the tender touch on our forehead when we were ailing, and experienced the first shockwaves of new love to our sister.
Yeah.
We took liberty because we were entitled to the vastness of human possibility, and that fed the seeds of hope living inside us that the freedom that the law was slow to recognize was nevertheless ours. And not because we sat back wishing and waiting on it, but because we fought for it, demanded it, and took it.
That's right.
So when the gun smoke cleared at Appomattox, and many of the promises made to the formerly enslaved went up with that smoke, we already had a tradition of taking our liberty because we had been doing it in ways large and small all along.
Yes, we
Black people have never been strangers to making a way out of nowhere, have they?
That's right.
No matter the promises, the land for assistance, for equal protection under the law were slow to materialize or vanished into thin air altogether, men, women, and children, by law in 1865, were free, emancipated. Black people had prayed through, cried through, resisted through the theft of our labor, theft of our babies, the theft of our husbands and wives. All of it meant to steal our humanity and our dignity. Many of us, too many of us, buried our loved ones for no better reason than the law had refused that we as Black people were entitled to be free. Yet my ancestors and elders, y'all's ancestors and elders, blinked their eyes closed as enslaved people and blinked their eyes back open one day to freedom, where expanses of land lay before them right here in Alabama. On that land, the possibilities of liberty they always knew they were entitled to blossomed right alongside the unknown. I often wonder whether the sun felt different on their skin or the air smelled different, whether any sensory detail marked the occasion. My mama called me her dreaming, y'all, so you can't blame me for that. But I also wonder if they just put one foot in front of the other and got to work, experiencing freedom in the best ways they knew how. I may think about what they smelled, what they saw, what they felt, but to be honest, from what I hear about my great-great-granddaddy, he was out there chopping down trees to get started on the schoolhouse, the church house. So here I am talking about tiptoeing through the tulips, and he's gone off to the woods to chop down some trees with an axe. Either way, they had the audacity to see possibility in land on which they had once toiled involuntarily and uncompensated as bondsmen and women. They entered work agreements and submitted requests for assistance to public and private institutions that blew up in their faces because they had the audacity to believe they were entitled to fair compensation for their work and help in getting on their feet after 246 years of bondage in a land they didn't choose, but they sure built. Our ancestors and elders had the audacity to go ahead and build schools for themselves and their children, to worship in churches founded by Black people, to open businesses and buy land one patch at a time. They ran for and were elected to offices from dog catcher to representative to the United States Congress. They built colleges, learned law, medicine, opened savings and loans, created benevolent societies to take care of our sick, elderly, infirm, and orphaned. They had nerve to build communities, nerve to vote, nerve to believe themselves full human beings and citizens of the United States, despite white supremacy and anti-Blackness and Jim Crow making it its business to tell us otherwise.
Yes.
Because they knew better. They taught us better. Many of our ancestors and elders maintained hope despite all efforts to break their spirits, and this hope moved them to action, gave nutrients to the liberty growing in their bellies and in their souls. Now, I'll be honest, if there's a place on earth where hope is more substantial than in Alabama, I don't know it. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know it. Love for this soil is one of the many gifts that my mama gave to me. You see, my folks are the Young family out of Demopolis, Alabama. She came up right here in Marengo County. So when I say Alabama hope, and I may be biased and I'm going to claim that, but I'm talking about something special, something substantial, something active, meaty, something you can hold on to, count on when the chips are down. I'm talking about hope that gets you out of bed every morning, that gives you peace to sleep at night. It's the kind of hope that you surrender to, allow yourself to be enveloped by, swept away by the belief that things not only can be better, but deserve to be better, must be better, and will be better.
Amen.
Alabama hope is not your average pie in the sky, make-believe, let's just sit back and wait and see if things get better kind of hope. No. It's powerful. It's transformative. It's taller than the highest mountain, deeper than the deepest sea, and wide as all outside. It's the kind of hope that understands that, no, we can't change everything wrong with the world, but with hard work, community, and hope, we can sure change something. Alabama hope carries with it not just the force of will, but the courage and the fortitude to get things done. It's hope firmly rooted in our blood and uniquely born of this soil. It's the kind of hope that comes from tribulation. Because from tribulation comes perseverance.
That's okay.
And from perseverance comes, I can't hear y'all.
Yes.
Comes character.
Yeah.
And from character comes hope. Right?
Yes.
Now y'all know I can't take credit for that. If you know Romans 5:3-5, you know it. But even if you don't know Romans 3:5, even if our ancestors didn't know Romans 5:3-5, couldn't read it, couldn't spell it, couldn't say Romans 5:3-5, they certainly understood the spirit of hope despite tribulation, because they knew they could come through the fire and live to tell the tale. Tribulation couldn't extinguish their hope because they already knew they had the perseverance, the character to see them through. This is the kind of hope Black people in Alabama carry around, harness, draw from, pass along, grow stronger from, and take with them into the fight every single day. So if there's one thing I can say about my folks in Alabama, it's that we know the power and the importance of hope, the power and the importance of the known and the unknown, the thought and the unthinkable. And what is hope but thinking that we can breathe life into tomorrow? That the liberty we take and the steps we make, the breath we breathe, can change tomorrow for the better. But only if we do the work. One of the best ways to rob people of hope is to splash across the news, put in magazines, pass around the internet, stories, images, gifts, and memes that Black people ain't never been about nothing and won't never be about nothing. That our spirits are irredeemable, our bodies only interesting if they are experiencing or performing some kind of mutilation, trauma, or pain. Some think this single note is all there is worth saying about Black people because that's all we are. That's what some people think, but we know better. When I look around this sanctuary, around this state, I don't see a single note, a single story. Around this sanctuary, I see music composed of my people. I see gospel, of course, we are in church. But maybe too a little jazz, a little country, a little blues, some R&B, a little rock and roll, some classical, maybe even a little trap music. Maybe, just maybe, the smallest amount of funk and likely a whole lot of soul. Our people are the alto and the soprano and everything in between. We aren't a single note, we're the music. Which is why I wrote my book. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I am merely a storyteller and an author. My debut novel, Moonrise over New Jessup, is about Alabama from cover to cover. It follows the story of Alice Young, a young Black woman who steps off a Greyhound in 1957 into New Jessup, Alabama. New Jessup is a fictional place. It's a side of town where everybody looks like her. The people walking through front doors, the folks sitting at, working in, and owning the lunch counters. There's the tailor-made dress shop, the local dressmaker, one, Washington Confectionery and Cream, where they sell ice cream and candy, the Collier House Hotel, and those of y'all in here who know about H.E. Gaston know the inspiration for the Collier House Hotel. New Jessup had elementary and high schools where children were being taught by teachers who looked like them, care about them. There were midwives and doctors practicing in my book at a place called Blakely Memorial Hospital. Competing grocery stores, and you can appreciate this, a place called Waverly's Fish Shack, fried fish place right on the banks of the Tombigbee, where they catch what you catch and you get what you get. They're driving on paved roads and they're dressed sharp. I mean sharp. The community is thriving. Now Alice gets off the bus and she's all Alabama to me. She's smart, she's determined, she's creative, she's funny, she's resilient, and most important, she knows her own mind. And in a place like New Jessup, she can rise and shine because she's surrounded by Black ones. Alice and her folks love New Jessup and know that as wonderful as it is, it deserves a more equal distribution of its tax dollars and to have the vote. Alice may not be on the front lines plotting and planning, but she supports the folks, their work, the best way she knows how. Alice and people like her were integral to the freedom movement too, and their stories deserve to be preserved and uplifted too. I won a literary prize for the manuscript in 2021, and it was published in January of this year. Now, with all I've told you about the book, you would think that readers would understand that New Jessup is a fully formed community, a society, if you will. I'm about to let y'all in on a little secret. You can imagine my surprise then when I got the following question about the book for a pre-publication interview. Now, in order to represent the question fairly, I'm going to read it verbatim, what this interviewer told me about New Jessup. In terms of thematics, character, situations, Moonrise over New Jessup is about social margins. How does the form, a historical and highly lyrical novel, suggest its philosophy? What about structures, the construct of this all-Black community being shaped by a swamp which is fluid and mucky and tenuous? Have you always been engaged by work that seeks to pull at the margins of society? Now, you know I had to read that question a few times to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing. I took my glasses off, polished them up, cleaned them, shined them. I even went back to the interviewer and asked for clarification because who assured me that yes, this was the question they meant to ask me. Have I always been engaged by work that seeks to pull at the margins of society? What? You know I have my backup over there. Because no matter what I wrote about us, the beauty of what we built and who we are to the bone, this interviewer could only see us as outsiders, needed us to be outsiders, I guess, and ready to trample each other trying to get inside wherever, I guess, somewhere. But what I cared about was not how she saw us, but how we saw us.
Yeah.
My answer couldn't be to the interviewer then, but to us, and so I'll read you a little snippet of what I wrote so as not to misrepresent again. After all, today we're talking about truth. So I told her, New Jessup is a story of love, creativity, and resilience. I encourage everyone to pick up my book, and I thank y'all for picking up my book. That's an ad-lib. And to meet Alice and the people in her life. But Moonrise over New Jessup is unlikely the right book for commentary about the margins of society.
Right.
Whenever I consider questions like this, I am forced to wonder what defines the margins and what defines society. Because New Jessup is a carefully planned Black community of at least 10,000 people, with multiple schools, a number of churches, a hospital, several banks, grocery stores, a 10-story hotel, multiple thriving business districts, a place where people own land and home and businesses, where everyone from domestic workers to doctors live, work, play, and send children to school together. It is a fully realized and self-reliant society upon itself, built and continuing to grow thanks to the founders and the stewards and the generations coming after. New Jessup, as in the 1,200 Black towns and settlements it represents, my people were determined to better our social, political, and economic circumstances the best ways we knew how. I'd love for people to read this book as an illustration of Black safe spaces we built and cherished and continued to fight for.
Yeah.
The rest of the interview was sort of similarly combative in nature. The magazine scrapped it and sent me a new list of questions from a new interviewer. Despite all evidence, I bring this up because words matter. Despite all evidence laid out to the contrary, this interviewer insisted that New Jessup and Black communities were the margins of society instead of just society themselves. That is the work of false narrative. And by telling me that New Jessup was about the margins of society, she was seeking agreement rather than information. But as my mama used to say, a lie don't care who tells it. Okay? And if I had agreed or even equivocated, I would have become part of spreading a lie. I'm a storyteller, y'all, not a liar.
Yes.
And that Black people are always on the outside trying to get in. I was not going to spread that lie. I was not going to spread the lie that we have little to nothing worth saving or talking about. I wasn't going to spread the lie that the grass is always greener and the ice is always colder everywhere we ain't. That is the work of false narrative, and I wasn't about to do that. Which is why the work that y'all are doing in this consortium as stewards of our history and keepers of our stories is so important.
Yes.
There are more stories about Black people in Alabama than all of us here in this sanctuary even have the breath in our bodies to tell. No, we can't know or tell the full life of every single one of our ancestors who has ever set foot on this soil. But we must tell the stories that we can tell for true.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell y'all a short story, and then I'll let you go. I know you have a full day planned, but I don't want to keep you too long. But I wrote Moonrise over New Jessup between June and September of 2020. I finished this book about Black people thriving and wanting independence in Alabama, loving this soil, wanting to stay on this soil to raise our children, build our communities, live our lives minding our own Black business as a celebration of my family. Fictionalized, of course, but with enough sprinklings of my family anecdotes for us to read it and find our own history and lore inside. My grandest ambition for the book was to self-publish it, write it around to family I know, family I don't know, giving them copies so we could all enjoy it together, be of something that would bring us closer together as a family. That was the hope I nurtured. I had finished the draft on August 1st of 2020, and then as emerging writers do, I opened this writing website called Submittable because I had some short fiction I wanted to get published in some literary magazines. I planned to let New Jessup sit for a while as I finished polishing it, these other works. I had never looked up a novel contest, not once. Not even contests to ask for a first chapter, let alone a whole book. So I was as surprised as anybody when the listing for the Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction popped up in my queue out of nowhere. And then I was intrigued. Socially engaged fiction? Thank goodness it wasn't some internet scam because I clicked on the link. But the description read, the Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction promotes fiction that addresses issues of social justice and the impact of culture and politics on human relationships. It goes on to define socially engaged, among other things, fiction that may explicitly examine movements that have brought about positive social change. Social engagement describes a moral obligation of individuals to engage with their communities in ways that promote a more respectful coexistence, to question and confront, to work towards betterment. Sounds like some ancestors, maybe some elders we know, I think. Because if that didn't sound like my book about Black people exercising hope and taking liberty right here in Alabama, you couldn't tell me. Yeah. When I read that description that popped up out of nowhere, I promise you it did, I knew that the story of Alice and New Jessup in Alabama fit the bill. After all, it was a story about Black people thriving on Alabama soil, seeking political independence so we could fully exercise the liberties we had fought to exercise long before America had ever promised we could. It centers us in our lives so that we can see one story of our full lives in literature. It's Alice's story of finding hope, love, connection, and fighting for liberty right here in Alabama. But that interviewer's question came from the singular way that Black people in Alabama have been historically portrayed in textbooks and literature and movies, television, that we only know pain, degradation, suffering, trauma, and fear on this soil, that we're always on the margins, and that, as these narratives tell us, we are incapable of loving one another in our communities. So false narratives ultimately lead to permission to run that next highway project through our communities, since it's just the margins of society anyway. False narratives will say that we don't care about the lead in our pipes or the pollution streaming from the local factories, polluting our air, our water, our soil. False narratives will say that we welcome addiction over policing, violence in our streets, because history books and literature too often offer a limited view of Blackness, particularly in the South. So I thought telling the story of Black towns and settlements could fit the requirements. I wanted New Jessup to be one book that reminds us the truth of our existence. So I polished my manuscript with every spare moment God gave me. And around 9 p.m., the night that it was due, I was ready to submit it. All I needed to do was write a synopsis. A synopsis? In the publishing industry, a synopsis is 1 or 2 paragraphs that you tell these people what your book is about. If you ever, this is a not so well-kept secret, if you ever want to see a writer sweat, curl up in the fetal position, cry, and pull their hair out all at the same time, just walk up to them and ask, so what is your book about? Ask them to distill months, years, decades of thinking and writing and editing and revising and second guessing and changing direction and staring at blank pages and throwing it out and start all over into a paragraph or 2. No problem. We gave you the book and you have nerve to ask us what it's about? As I sat there with hours left to submit my manuscript, I almost gave up. I hadn't even given the book a title, let alone thought about writing a synopsis. I didn't know what a synopsis was, let alone how to write one, let alone how to write a convincing one. And I almost gave up. After all that work and sacrifice and sleepless nights and can't see mornings, and I know somebody knows what I'm talking about when I say can't see mornings, I almost gave up. But my mama's voice, God rest her soul, my mama's voice, rang through as true and clear as if she was sitting right there next to me. My mama's voice that raised me to be powerful, phenomenal, extraordinary, exceptional. Yes. My mama's voice that told me I was spared as her miracle baby to stay here on this earth and do for my community. My mama's voice, who told me every day of her life that I am a child of God, that I am blessed and highly favored, that the devil is a liar, that no weapon formed against me shall prosper, and that every day is a great day to be Black. My mama, born, raised, fortified, her spine forged right here in Marengo County, Demopolis, Alabama, who taught me to act on hope when she drilled into my head, nothing beats a failure like a try. Yeah. And, Jamila, you better go out in this world and make people tell you no. Yes. Words of hope that she learned right here. Words of hope that stick with me to this day. Yes. So I broke up that pity party and won. Wrote my synopsis and won the Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged. After my greatest ambition was to self-publish, that was nothing but God saying, watch this. Watch this. Y'all got here testify today, excuse me. But Moonrise over New Jessup is not possible without the preservation of our history. The work that the consortium, that every single one of y'all is doing here today, it was meant to preserve one slice of our lives on this soil. I am not somebody who can deny the horrors of chattel slavery existed in this country. I am not somebody who can deny that those horrors infiltrated the very Constitution and the laws upon which the foundation that my country, 'tis of thee, still rests today. I will not deny that Jim Crow, mass incarceration, diversion of resources from Black communities, discrimination in employment, housing, voting exists in the year of our Lord 2023. You won't get me to deny any of that. Indeed, I practice law to fight against it. But as they say, a half-truth is still a whole lie. We as a people are more than our degradation, our trauma, our pain, and the preservation of our history affirms that over and over again. Is it any secret that Black people know tribulation? Is it? Anybody here know that? Of course not. We have been through the fire. But sometimes what seems to need to be secret is this idea that Black people know joy, that we know excellence and achievement too, that we grew up in generations of loving families and communities that nurture us, provide for us, snatch us up when we get out of line, or maybe press a piece of candy into our palm behind mama's back. New Jessup and the communities inspired it. Hobson City, Alabama, Africatown, Alabama, Peacock Track in Montgomery, Alabama, Titusville right here in Birmingham, Alabama, places where we built pharmacies, photography studios, nursing homes, and on and on and on. We had veterinarians, entrepreneurs, radio DJs, mechanics, carpenters, and on and on and on, where we had whole communities who lived together, loved together, quarreled together, disagreed, found common ground, didn't find common ground, left, came back, talked about each other, and prayed over each other. Communities where we were our own societies. My Auntie Jay, who couldn't be here today, she's from Montgomery, John may say. She always reminds me, you better stay out here telling these people that Alabama is more than the Civil War and civil rights. So I'll leave y'all with this today. I love Alabama. When Director Njumbe extended the invitation to speak here today, I prayed that God would not only give me the words, but to deliver remarks worthy of the summer convening. I sincerely hope that what I would leave you all today would be, if nothing else, knowledge that my heart is here, that my hope is born here, lives here, is fortified here. I was raised to love this soil. I was raised to know that my people took their liberty on this soil in ways large and small, that Black folks are allowed to love Alabama. The seeds of our hope flourish in this Black Belt soil, and it's because we continue to hope that we continue to take liberty. It's because we continue to hope that we exercise a love for this soil that defies the sins in the hearts of man. It is because we continue to hope that we continue to tell our stories and promote our truth. Thank you.